ready to dive in. Today, we're tackling something we all kind of swim in every day, the news media.
Yeah,
We're talking about how it really works, the stuff behind the headlines, and why it even matters to you. You know, that feeling you get when the news feels biased, repetitive, or just like super negative.
totally.
Well, today we're going to break all of that down and more using some insights from media consultant Eric May and his book, The Modern Media Strategist.
Yeah, and the thing about May's book, it really pulls back the curtain on the whole industry.
Yeah.
He doesn't just tell us what's happening, he goes deep on the why, which is, so important for all of us to make sense of the news.
Exactly. And one thing that always kind of, bugged me is this like contradiction. News is supposed to be public interest, keep us all informed,
Right.
but it's also a business,
Mm-hmm.
and businesses need to make money. So how do those two things even work together?
It's a great question. May actually argues that those two roles, serving the public, and making money, they actually go hand in hand.
Okay.
Think about it. If a news organization consistently puts out accurate, interesting, compelling content, that's going to bring in a bigger audience, right?
Makes
And
sense.
a bigger audience means more ad revenue, more subscribers. That lets them invest back into better reporting.
So it's not like this constant battle between like doing good and the bottom line. They can work together.
Totally. And it's not just private news organizations either, even public broadcasters, even
Yeah.
though they're not driven by profit in the same way, they still have to get people to watch and listen to justify their funding, to,
Yeah.
do their public service thing.
Okay, that makes sense. But then that brings up another question for me. If news organizations are like businesses competing for our attention, how do they figure out what we even want to see? It's
Right.
not like they can just guess, right?
No, it's not about guessing. It's about knowing their audience really well. News organizations put a ton of effort into audience research. I mean, they use all sorts of methods to understand what makes us tick, what keeps us reading, watching, clicking,
Yeah.
focus groups, website traffic analysis, you name it. They even do surveys to see what people want.
So there's a whole science behind it.
Oh, yeah.
That's fascinating. It's kind of like a chef. They have to know what their customers like, what ingredients people want, what flavors are popular, how to even make the dish look good so people want to eat it.
That's a really good analogy. And just like chefs, news organizations are constantly trying new things based on what they learned about their audience.
Just what do we want? What are the things that make us consume news? But what are those ingredients?
May actually lays it out really well in the book. He says, we love stories with a strong human element. Things that get us emotional, that make us connect to the people in the story.
Right. It's not just facts and figures. It's got to make you feel something.
Yeah, and it's not just any emotion either. May says we love novelty, the unexpected. We want to be surprised, see things that challenge our ideas or break stereotypes. It's almost like our brains are wired to pay more attention to the unusual.
I guess that explains why we're so drawn to those man bites dog stories.
Exactly. And it's not just about the content itself, it's how it's presented. We're drawn to powerful images, those sound bites that really stick with you, those moments that stay with you long after you finish reading or watching. Think about the iconic images from 9/11, the firefighter carrying the baby from the rubble. Those images just stick with you.
They really do. But there's got to be more to it than just shock value and emotional stuff, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't the news also need to be relevant to our lives to really grab us?
You're totally right. Relevance is key. People want to know how events, big or small, will impact them directly. They want information that helps them understand the world, the things that affect them.
So it's not like news organizations are just picking stories at random.
Away.
They're responding to very specific things that their audience wants.
Exactly. And those wants really impact what we see and hear in the news. For example, remember when we were talking about the negativity bias in news coverage? Well, that tendency for the news to focus on the bad stuff, it's not just some random choice. It's actually tied to our desire for novelty and the unexpected, the stuff we were just talking about.
Wait, so you're saying our brains are hardwired to be attracted to bad news?
Yeah, kind of. Think about it, from a way back when perspective.
Right.
Being aware of threats and danger, that was key for survival, right?
Yeah.
Those who were more tuned into the negative stuff were probably more likely to avoid danger and pass on their genes. So in a way, our fascination with bad news is kind of built into us.
Okay, yeah, I guess that makes sense, historically. But doesn't it feel like sometimes the news just goes way too far with the negativity? It's
Hmm.
like they're trying to make us all anxious and depressed or something.
Yeah, I get that. And May actually talks about this in his book. He says there's a fine line between reporting on important negative events and like sensationalizing them just for ratings or clicks.
That's what bugs me sometimes. It feels like they're using our negativity bias against us instead of being responsible with it.
And that's where media literacy comes in. We, as consumers of news, we need to be critical of what we're seeing and hearing. Ask ourselves, is this news organization being fair? Are they giving us the whole story, or are they just trying to scare us with those crazy headlines?
So it's not just about taking in whatever the news throws at us. We need to be like active, questioning what we see, looking for different viewpoints.
Absolutely. And that brings us to another common complaint people have about the news accuracy and bias. It's easy to get frustrated when you see mistakes or feel like a story is being told from a certain angle, but we got to remember news is fast-paced, it's complex, and mistakes happen.
Especially these days with social media, everything moves so fast.
Exactly. And sometimes that pressure to be first can lead to errors or even just skipping the fact checking.
So how do we deal with that? How do we know what's real?
Again, it comes down to being an active and smart consumer. It's about getting your news from multiple sources, comparing different perspectives, developing your own critical thinking. If a story feels one-sided or incomplete, dig deeper.
Mm.
Look at other outlets covering the same event. Think about the sources they're using. Ask yourself, are they being fair? Are they presenting a balanced view?
So we can't just rely on one news source.
Right.
We've got to diversify our media diet.
Exactly. And that's especially important when it comes to that feeling that the news only tells one side of the story. No one news outlet can capture everything, the whole complexity of any issue.
Yeah.
That's why it's so important to seek out diverse voices and opinions to get a fuller understanding.
That's a really important point.
Yeah.
We need to step outside of our own bubbles and be open to different views, even if they make us, uncomfortable.
Totally. And that actually connects to the last part of May's book where he shifts from like consuming news to actually engaging with it. He asks, what if you have a story you want to share with the world? How can you get the media to cover it?
That's an interesting question. I mean, it's one thing to analyze the news, but actually trying to get your story out there, that's a whole other thing.
It is. And May's advice is pretty simple, but it's powerful. Think like a news producer.
What do you mean?
Remember everything we've talked about: human element, novelty, emotion, relevance to a bigger audience. If you want your story covered, you need to frame it in a way that connects with those things.
So we need to look at our story the way a news organization would.
Yeah, exactly. Does your story have a strong human interest angle? Does it reveal something unexpected? Does it make people feel something? And is it relevant to more than just a few people? If you can answer yes to those, you're on the right track.
So it's not about manipulating the media or tricking them. It's about understanding how they work and shaping your message to fit.
Exactly. And not every story has to be huge or world-changing to be newsworthy. Sometimes it's about finding that unique angle, that human connection that makes it stand out.
Makes sense. But realistically, not every story is going to have that wow factor. What about the important but less exciting issues? How do those get covered?
That's where you have to be creative and persistent. You might need to get clever with how you pitch it, connect it to what's happening in the world, or really emphasize the human impact.
So it sounds like getting your story out there is as much about strategy as it is about the story itself.
Definitely. You have to be your own advocate, your own media expert.
Yeah.
And that's why understanding how the news media works, like May explains in his book, is so important. It gives you the tools and knowledge to navigate it all.
This has been really eye-opening. It's like we've been given a new way to look at the news.
And that's exactly what we wanted to do with this deep dive.
So as we start to wrap up our exploration of May's work, I'm curious, what's the biggest takeaway for you? Like what surprised you the most, or what was the most insightful thing from May's book?
You know, I think for me, it was realizing that the news media isn't this like big scary monster.
Right.
It's a bunch of different people and organizations, each with their own goals and limitations and biases.
Hmm.
And understanding that is like key to making sense of it all.
I think that's a really good point. We always talk about the media as if it's this one thing,
Yeah.
but it's people, right?
Yeah.
People making choices, people who are influenced by the same things we've been talking about, the need to get an audience, the pressure to be first, all that.
Totally. And once you get that, you start to see all those things that bug us about news coverage, the negativity, the focus on conflict in a different way.
Mm.
It's not that those things are bad or done on purpose. It's just, a reflection of how it all works.
So instead of just complaining about, the media, we can be more thoughtful about it. We can ask ourselves, why is this story being told this way? What's the motivation behind it?
Yeah,
How can I make sure I'm getting a full and accurate picture?
exactly. And remember, being critical doesn't mean you have to be cynical or distrust everything you see. It's about, being active, asking questions, getting different perspectives, and then forming your own opinion.
I like that. It's like taking charge of how we learn about things, not just passively letting the news wash over us.
Exactly. And I think that's the most empowering part of May's book. He's not just showing us how things work behind the scenes. He's giving us the tools to be more informed and more engaged.
Absolutely. Well, as we wrap up our deep dive into the news media, I want to leave our listeners with one last thing to think about.
Hmm.
Knowing all of this, how the news is made, what influences it, and even how to get your own story out there. How might this change the way you read an article or watch a news segment?
Right. Will you be more aware of the human element, the emotion, the potential biases? Will you look for different sources to get a bigger picture? And if you have a story to tell, will you use this knowledge to shape your message and get it out there?
Those are all great questions to keep in mind because ultimately being an informed citizen is a journey. It
Mm.
takes curiosity, it takes critical thinking, and it takes a willingness to engage with the world.
And the more you know about how the news media works, the better prepared you'll be to navigate it all and make good decisions about the things that matter to you.
Oh, couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the news media. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep asking questions.